Hello, fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here. Welcome back to another episode of the Battlemech Primer, the series where our polls are as fiercely safeguarded as a Michigan voting center at 3 a.m. You know, I didn't think it was possible, but somehow all of you managed to band together and pick one of my favorite machines to cover, a Battlemech that perfectly encapsulates everything I love about light mechs, as well as the sheer brutality of the inner sphere. Today, by popular demand, we're going to take a little look at this little guy and see what makes it tick, hopefully without setting fire to the mech bay this time. I have a deep personal connection to this mech, as it's the machine I inherited from my grandfather, and the one that I use the most often, both in the field and the arena. Today, we're taking a look at the Firestarter. The Firestarter was first produced in 2550 by Argyle Technologies, making it one of the oldest mech designs still in widespread use today. It's also one of the most specialized Battlemechs ever built, designed for a single role. No prizes for guessing what it was. At the time, Battlemech design was still in its Wild West days. The standards and conventions were still largely theoretical, leading to some truly unique creations. With the rise of the Mackie came an entire new breed of warfare, a style of combat that had never been seen before. And while over a century had passed since its introduction, the exact idea of what a Battlemech was or should be was still fairly vague. The big bruisers and anti-mech machines had dominated the early years, with a couple small exceptions here and there. Battlemechs were meant to be bigger, meaner Mackies, and so they were built to walk into blazing enemy fire, tank the damage, and dish out a few cans of whoop-ass in a single decisive engagement. But as the years wore on and battlefield commanders began to get a feel for this new age of combat, the need for more specialized Battlemechs became apparent. Mechs started to appear that broke from the traditional mold, machines that could scout, snipe, provide indirect fire support, engage aircraft, and everything else in between. The Battlemech concept had outgrown its infancy, developing from an age of awkward, clumsy stompers into an era of refined, sophisticated technology. In many ways, Battlemech design was becoming an art all its own, and it was into this world of envelope pushing and refining that the Firestarter would emerge. Because at some point somebody said, yeah, this mech thing is cool and all, but what if it could set an entire planet on fire? The initial utility of the Firestarter was somewhat questionable. It was a speedy little mech that was designed for a single purpose: to do exactly what it said on the tin. It may be hard to believe, but the whole idea of the Firestarter was, in fact, to start fires. But not just any old fire, oh no. I'm talking conflagrations that would make the Great Chicago Fire look like a birthday candle. See, the Firestarter was equipped with no less than 4 flamers, one at each arm, one pointed forward in the center torso, and another one in the rear. Unlike traditional flamethrowers, which spray pressurized fuel which is then set ablaze, a flamer draws its energy directly from the Battlemech's reactor, then releases that energy in the form of a plasma burn. This means that flamers can theoretically burn forever without the need to refuel. It also means that they burn hotter than your typical flamethrower. While a flamethrower will engulf someone in fire, a flamer is more likely to outright vaporize someone on the spot, while setting fire to anything nearby. So it doesn't even have to hit you directly to light you up, just somewhere in your general area. While this makes the flamer perhaps the shortest range mech-scale weapon ever designed, its ability to spread heat over a wide surface makes it perfect for turning a peaceful forest into that one scene from Bambi. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Mage Leader, setting things on fire is cool and everything, but how practical is it on a battlefield?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, obnoxiously nasal audience member. Battlemechs, as it turns out, have something of an aversion to fire. Their reactors, not to mention their weapons, tend to generate large quantities of heat, relying on big heat sinks to keep the engine from, well, exploding. So walking one into a forest fire, where the ambient temperature is often high enough to vaporize water before it hits the flame, is a decisive strategic maneuver that we in the business like to call fucking stupid. This is where the Firestarter shines. Its ability to make a fire out of just about anything is useful for sealing off avenues of approach, or turning an enemy's cover into a deadly hellscape. Its speed and jump jets allow it to sprint around the battlefield, incinerating troublesome pockets of infantry, as well as the building they're hiding in, before skipping away to absolutely ruin a mech warrior's day. It has a low profile and decent armor for its weight, making it a difficult target to hit. All of these factors make the Firestarter a supreme scout mech, useful for gathering intel and raiding outposts or Curitan orphanages. It's able to use its flamers to escape pursuers by creating a barrier behind it, as well as torching the resources of its own side should a scorched earth approach be needed. It's also useful as a flanker, and many modern variants are equipped with ECM to assist them in slipping behind enemy lines. Once there, a pair of medium lasers give it a little punch, though not enough for serious damage. A Firestarter will instead use its flamers to drive up a mech's heat levels, causing it to shut down or even go critical. Of course, it needs to close to point-blank range in order to do this, but if the bigger Battlemechs are distracted enough, then they could find themselves in superheated water very quickly. Of course, there are some drawbacks to the Firestarter. Being designed for such a specialized function requires an equally specialized mech warrior. It's a capable machine, but also a very vulnerable one. It lacks the raw firepower needed for brawling, and there are more heavily armed light mechs that can run it down. A Firestarter's pilot lives and dies by his situational awareness and knowing when it's time to run and live to flame another day. Knowing where the enemies are and what routes to take ahead of time are an absolute necessity, making the Firestarter one of the most difficult mechs to use well. Of course, it's not just an oversized flamethrower, the Firestarter is also one of the easiest mechs to modify. Since flamers run off of the mech's reactor and not a fuel supply, the hardpoint connections are similar to those used by other energy weapons, meaning that you can turn a Firestarter from a solid scout mech into an incredible one. With a few simple modifications, the flamers can be swapped out for lasers, allowing the mech to engage with enemies on a more equal footing. But this fact creates an obvious question. If the flamers don't run on fuel, then what are the big tanks on the shoulders for? Well... I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Anyway, aside from being filled with tasty beverages, the Firestarter is also a fantastic harasser, having just enough armor to keep it alive without slowing it down. If you find one out in the field somewhere, and you will, it's a machine that you can customize to perfectly suit a number of different roles. That means that you've essentially got several mechs for the price of one, if you have enough time and supplies for refits. But it gets even better. In 3049, the Federated Commonwealth upgraded the Firestarter with tech pulled from the Hell Memory Core, further expanding its abilities by giving it more weapons, an AMS system, and a Beagle Active Probe, which transformed it into arguably one of the best scout mechs ever built. So while other mech designs have sailed off into the sunset, their legacies forgotten as lost tech and clan bullshit replaces them, the Firestarter lives on even today, happily doing the same thing that it's always done. Starting motherfucking fires. So that's the Firestarter. It's a mech built to do something different. A specialist weapon for specialized mech warriors. A weapon that, when used properly, can control an entire battlefield. It fights like David against Goliath, punching above its weight in terms of its tactical applications. While it can't blow away an enemy lance like some heavier machines, it can ensure that the same lance moves exactly where you want them to go. And that's a power that no laser will ever come close to granting you. It's a thinking man's machine, requiring skill and good battle sense. It's also a little gift for the small pyromaniac child that lives inside each and every one of us. So the next time you're in the market for one of the best light mechs ever built, give the Firestarter a try. You won't be disappointed. And if you are, then just give the thing to me. Don't worry, I'll take good care of it. Thank you all so much for watching, and a special thank you to my $5 plus patrons: Arcos Raid, Spacer, Rivius, Kyle Vidari, Metal Dragonar, Tim Cook, Tomoyaga Tudor, Gary Moses Sweeney, and Admiral Chirino. If you would like to join Mage Squadron yourself, then consider joining up via the link in the description. You can also register your name with our unit via the red subscribe button, or by leaving a comment down below. Your support is what keeps me coming back, and all patron levels get access to Mage Squadron's Discord server. I look forward to hanging out with you all, and until next time, this is Mage Leader, signing off.